you're looking at a Mac Mini. This Mac Mini is on a LAN that is connected to a DDP. So this is the DDP Web Interface. So the DDP is on this 234.29 IP. And you can see here that there's a little line dragged between this Mac here, which is the Mac Mini, and this test volume over here. So I actually have some storage from the DDP mounted up here, and there's some data here that we're going to back up. So you see this folder here, sync source. It's got 4 files in it. This is residing on the DDP, and what we're going to do is we're going to show you how we can replicate that between the DDP and, in this case, the Mac, but it's obviously possible to replicate between one DDP and another. So before I start giving you a demo properly, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the software and what it can do. So what we have here is just a little depiction of a DDP synchronized workflow, just some examples. So this is the horizontal line here is your Ethernet LAN, and here we have a big DDP box, which is potentially going to be your live DDP where you're doing editing and so on, and this is where your precious data is that you need to replicate somehow to make it more secure. So if we were to add a mirror DDP down at the bottom connecting to the same Ethernet LAN, then one of the things that Synchronize allows us to do is do a replication of the live DDP to the mirror. So the mirror could be the less expensive DDP with the lesser drives in it, and this replication happens on a schedule. So the software takes care of it in the background. It could be every couple of hours, it could be twice a day, and we quickly determine what's different between the mirror and the live DDP, and then transmit those changes across the LAN, across the Ethernet LAN, so that the mirror DDP is always up to date, and if needed could replace the live DDP in the event of a failure. And of course you could replicate back the other way after the failure has been resolved to repopulate the live DDP with anything that got changed in on the mirror. Another example is maybe you have a micro DDP. Maybe it's always on the LAN, or maybe it comes and goes, but you could use Synchronize to take the data from the micro DDP and mirror that back to the live server so that that data is both saved in a second place and maybe accessible to more people through the live DDP. So you can set up sync plans to do all kinds of different things. Another example would be, rather than replicating to a DDP, you've got some kind of file server. So down here we're showing that we could be running on OS 10 Windows Linux, FreeBSD as well as should be on that list. Or maybe you've got a NAS box that where you've got P5 installed. So whatever you've got, whatever the storage you've got available on the network, we can also replicate there from the DDP. So there's lots of different ways that you can do this. Just generally speaking, where you've got a source and a destination, so a source is a DDP, destination is a DDP or a file server, we're replicating and we're taking the original files and folders that reside on the DDP, and we're replicating these and writing files and folders onto a destination. So it's not like a backup where you have to do a restore in order to get the data back from wherever you saved it to. You can just go and mount and view the source data, the place that you copied your data to, just the same as it was on the original machine. And finally, we can do versioning of data. That basically means that as data is changing on the source, we can track those changes on the destination, and you can go back to previous versions of files. So it's not just a mirror where everything is the same as the source. We can also track previous versions of files on that destination as well. So, armed with that information, what I'm going to do is flick the browser to the web interface of Archiware P5 running on the DDP. So what we're looking at here, you see the .29 IP address is the same for both the DDP Web Interface and for P5's Web Interface. They're both being hosted on the DDP. So what we're seeing here on this Mac is the perspective of the data on the DDP. So if we flick over to the Synchronize section, you can see the 4 different modules at the top here. These will obviously be switched on or off depending upon the licensing that you've got on your P5 installation on your DDP. Under Synchronize, we get to see the main elements of what you need to set up to do a sync, which basically comes down to the client machines. So these are the other DDPs or machines generally on the network that you're going to be able to synchronize to. And down here we have our synchronized plans. We're going to create one of these in a second. and the synchronized plan defines what data you want to synchronize, where it needs to go, and how often, basically. So in order to show you a sync plan actually running, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the data on the DDP that currently is in this sync source folder. Yeah, so there's 4 files here, about a gigabyte of data, and we're going to synchronize that from the DDP to the Mac. So this folder here on the Mac desktop, data from DDP, is actually, although they're showing up next to each other on the desktop, they're actually an Ethernet network away from each other. So we're going to get that data across, first of all, and then you'll see how that's done, and then we'll get it across and we'll track some version changing, so you can see a little bit more advanced stuff going on. So the first thing I need to do if I want to sync that data is the DDP needs to know about the Mac Mini. So I already set this up to save us a bit of time. So you see the Mac Mini at the top here. If I double click on that to show you what that looks like, it's basically the IP address of the Mac Mini, which is this one, and an account on the Mac Mini, which is the demo account, and that allows the DDP to talk to the Mac, basically. Your P5 is installed on this Mac so that the P5 software on the DDP can talk directly to P5 on the Mac, so we get all of our WAN optimization and our high-speed transfer and stuff working. You can see here we have options to compress and encrypt, so if I was going across a public network, and that's going to help the data go quicker and more securely, then I can switch those 2 options on. So that's the Mac Mini set up as a client. Now I'm going to go down to my sync plan, and I'm going to create a new one. And it doesn't matter what I call it, Untitled is fine. So the source of the data is going to be the local machine, which remember is the DDP. So if I'm looking at the local machine through this button here, browsing the storage on the DDP, I will be able to identify my test volume, which is the one that you can see mounted on the desktop, and in there I can go to the sync webinar and the sync source folder and select it. So I could have multiple folders in here, but at the moment I'm just going to select that sync source folder, which is the one that I showed you up here, this one, right? So that's set up, and my destination, I want it to be this folder here, which is on the Mac Mini. So I'm going to choose the Mac Mini as my destination client, and then using the browse here, you can see all the file system browsing is done in the web browser, so you can do this from any location. And I know that folder is in users, and then the demo user, and then it's on the desktop. So if I go to desktop, I'll be able to see this folder here, data from DDP, select it, and now I'm nearly done. So I've selected my source and destination. All I need to do now is specify a schedule. So I'm going to hit new. You can see the schedule is a list, and you can have different schedules doing different things at different times. So I'm going to begin by doing an update where we copy new stuff over to the destination. I could say I want this to run beginning at 7 o'clock in the morning through till 1900 hours. Whoops, every 2 hours, and that allows me to put in 1900 hours. So you can see just in one configuration there, I can set a weekday bi-hourly synchronization where this Mac gets updated with any changes from the DDP. Additionally, I could ignore those PNG files in that folder if I wanted to by creating a filter that does that for me. So you don't have to sync everything. You can decide what's really useful to be backed up via the sync and ignore maybe other sort of temporary files that your edit software might create. Maybe you don't want to copy those across. So I apply that schedule, and that one pops up in the list, and everything in Archiware runs unattended, so you can kind of walk away now knowing that this is going to run. If I look in the job monitor window, which tracks everything that's running and everything that's scheduled to run, you'll now see that the DDP backup is scheduled to run start time 1st of August. It's actually got the wrong schedule on it, so let me just fix that. So you'll see this event here, they must have not selected the right date for it somehow, so let's just select the right date. Okay, so the job will basically then automatically, it's this untitled one, sorry, it wasn't showing up. So this is going to run at 11 o'clock, but we can start it manually. So let's do that now. So we start the job, so yep, we want to start it, and then the job will run in the job monitor, and if you've got this interface open, then you can monitor the job, you can see what it's doing, it's looking for changes and working out what it needs to copy across. Then there'll be some stats about the file it's copying and how fast it's going. So this is just going to be limited by the speed of your Ethernet and the devices that you've got the sync running between. So you can see at the moment it's copying this MP4 file, and when it's finished, the job will shut down, and then it will run 2 hours later, and it will just keep going like that. There's no, you don't need to attend to it, it just happens in the background. Additionally, these logs that get created when jobs run can be emailed somewhere so that somebody can take care of any errors or problems with the job via an email. So they don't need to interact with the system once it's set up. So if we look in this folder now, I'm expecting to see the files that we synchronized across. There they are. So if we just touch the quick view on the movie, we should be able to see that that's a valid movie file because it's going to start playing some footage. There we go. There's a dog. Whole building. Close that down. Okay, so that's step one. So the next thing I'm going to show you is a little bit about version tracking. So maybe the files on the source are getting changed, and we want to be able to keep a couple of previous versions of files in case somebody makes a daft mistake and overwrites a file with something that's not useful. So if we go back to the source data here, let's say we take this PNG file here, because this is something that I can easily make a change to. I'm going to open that in the preview app. You can see this is just a screen grab. And I'm going to make a crop on that file, just so that that file is now, changed. I'm going to save that change. And now in here you can see this file has been modified today at 10:33, which is the time now in Germany. So what we can do now is go back to our sync plan. And if we look at the sync that we're doing, I'm going to say keep previous file versions and just make that little change and apply that. And then from within the sync plan, I'm going to use the Start Now button just to run that job again. And this time it doesn't have to copy all the data that it copied previously because the big movie file has already been copied. So all it's going to do is identify that there's one file that's changed and copy that file across, but keep the previous version of that file as well. Obviously, if you're doing this in a live environment, you need to make sure you have enough space to accommodate all of those previous versions. So you can see here the one that we just ran, the first time we ran it, it copied 846 megabytes, but that time copied just 34K, which would be that PNG that changed. So now if we go looking in the destination folder, you'll see that the file that I modified is that one, which is the crop, but on the versions folder here, we've kept the first version of that file prior to the crop, right? So that's the two versions of that file here and down here. And last thing I'm going to show you is the fact that within the sync plan you can, of course, set up more complex stuff like how many versions do you want to keep, so on. Last thing I'm going to show you actually is that up here under Overview, you get to see for each of the sync plans that you've got running, when did it last run, was it okay, green light, it finished. And also, if you want to sort of download a demo key and have a play with this, we have what we call the Getting Started section, where you can configure the whole thing in 3 steps. So you've got source, target, and interval, and that's all you need to set up to get the thing working. If you click on the Setup Assistant here, you can go straight in and you can choose your data from different client machines in one click. So you can see here the interface is kind of simplified. It doesn't show you all of the powerful stuff, but it gives you a very easy way of getting into the product and getting something working. And once you've configured it via this 1, 2, 3, you can go back and tweak the more advanced features. Okay, so it's 9:35 over in London. We are done for the live demo. So I'm going to hand the audio back to Mark now, and we'll take questions if anybody has a question for us.
Yeah, thank you, David, for the demo, and thank you, Elvin. We do have some questions here. So one is, Synchronize is more for business continuity and disaster recovery. Yes, that's right in a way. So you can look at it as a failover and immediate replacement for your primary storage, but you can also look at it as a traditional backup. It depends if you need user level access to it in the form of a browser interface, because that's only offered in P5 backup, and if you want to have offsite storage in the form of tape, because that's also only offered in P5 backup. So P5 Synchronize is disk to disk only, has no user interface for restore, and there is no restore necessary because it's a failover process. And you can switch over, but you can use it as a backup. So it depends on the requirements that you have. And you can also use it, as we mentioned, to sync to remote sites. So this was one question. Okay, interesting question here. What is sacrificed during a synchronization? Am I sacrificing most of my bandwidth, affecting clients connected? You can actually throttle the bandwidth. Maybe David can elaborate on that a little bit. So you can say that you only use a portion of the available bandwidth for a sync process so that you can continue with your work. And maybe David is pulling the interface right now to show that. So here we have this throttling interface, and this is a way to kind of keep a specific quality of service available for all other work that has to be done with the DDP.
Sure, yeah. I would just add there that the other thing you can do is run the synchronization over a different network interface. So create a separate IP network, subnet, maybe using one interface from the DDP going to the other DDP or the other machine. And that way you can isolate the synchronization network traffic from the editor's network traffic, and then the editors won't see any difference. Also, because we only identify and copy the changes at each point throughout the day when we're synchronizing, normally the syncs don't run for that long. So you would also probably make sure that you don't run the syncs so frequently that it's spending a lot of the day copying stuff. So we would expect the syncs to run fairly quickly and just copy modified stuff.
There is another question here about, do you need third-party products to accelerate or compensate for long latency when you replicate to remote locations? That's a good question. We all know there are third-party products that just try to optimize the connection, but with P5 that is already built in. So we started from the very beginning to optimize and have additional features for our connection that we have between DDP installs, between P5 installs, sorry, could be DDP installs as well. So as soon as you have a P5 connection from one P5 server to another P5, we have not only the bandwidth limitation here and throttling, but we also have a block compression compensation for latency and everything else built in, also an encryption option, as we can see here in the interface. So there's no need for additional third-party products to optimize the remote connection. And there's another question here. Do I have to install P5 on all involved machines? Yes, that's the right perspective. So you install P5 on all machines that you want to clone to, or there's another option if you're using something like a NAS system that you cannot install P5 on. You would have to mount this on a Mac or PC or Linux machine and have P5 installed on that, so that you use it as a mounted volume. And if I look here again at the questions panel, there is one more here. Can you sync to another country or across long distances? Yes, that's what you can do. We mentioned that briefly. As long as you have either dedicated line or line with enough throughput, you can sync between locations that can be very remote, like we have customers that sync from Singapore to New York to London regularly to have an identical data set on all 3 locations. So that's one of the options that you have. It could be either local or in your LAN, in your WAN, or outside over the internet to very remote locations. So as far as I can see, there's another question. File system event support. So there's a question about file system events. Maybe David wants to elaborate on that.
Yeah, we support file system events on OSs where they are supported. So that's Mac and Windows. I actually don't know if we support file system events on the DDP itself. Perhaps Elvin knows that.
Oh, I don't know actually. You know.
No. Okay. Well, if that person wants to submit their email address, but maybe via the chat window, I'll find out and let you know directly. But yeah, we do support file system events generally. So if I just show you within the sync plan that we set up during my demo, if we look at this particular update sync that we're running every 2 hours, one of the options here is to determine whether we discover the changes by, just waiting for this window to update, whether we discover changes by using file system events or actually scanning the file system. So I didn't click the right thing. There we go. So this is the window where you choose scanning or file system events. So yeah, we support them, but I don't happen to know off the top of my head whether we support them on the DDP. So
Okay.
yeah, type your email address in and I'll send you an email and confirm.
Yeah, we will find out. There is an iNotify service on Linux systems that I know we support. I'm not sure if that is valid for the DDP though. Okay, so from the question side, this is all that I can see in the question window. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to send them over to us, to either one of us, and we're happy to assist you with that. Thank you for your time, for participating, and I would like to remind